But you can see a little bit what Rushdie is talking about,
Yeah.
because when you look at some of your old friends, they do seem, you can hear in their attacks upon you a disappointment about having lost something. I mean, if I look, I don't know, I mean, Ian Baruma
that's
or Terry Eagleton, I mean, these were, you were quite close to them.
It takes a lot to make me cry. Takes a lot to make me cry. I find the work of these people practically unreadable. It's not because I disagree with it. It's that I think what they've written is mediocre and hopelessly adapted to the needs of power in a way that mine, I don't think was. I mean, we said we have to take the risk of removing this keystone of totalitarian power which is about to turn itself into a Rwanda, and not just mutate from a failed state into a rogue state and back again at a choke point of the world economy. That has to be opposed, and it's people freed from the large and horrible camp in which they've been forced to dwell. There's no need for any euphemism in that. The people who argue, I suppose you could say Terry Eagleton argues, or people like Ian Baruma who say, well, you know, it's very risky, this kind of thing. Well, yes, it is. It's risky because you've let it get to that stage. Risky to get rid of Slobodan Milosevic. And the predictions that there'd be a lot more civil strife in Bosnia if we did intervene, or in Kosovo, were not to be dismissed. I didn't think they would be as bad as they were, but they could have been. But that doesn't mean you can't intervene. These are things that require intense reasoning and thought. What I got was none of that at all. I got basically, and again, as I said, it takes a lot to make me cry, and I have a fairly broad back and a fairly thick skin. What I got was, why have you become a tool of the Jewish lobby? Huh? Why have you joined the Bush family's relentless quest to pick a fight, which they've been trying to avoid for all these years? Why are you a warmongering neoconservative? I mean, unbelievable stuff of this kind.
Rich Italian coffee, entertaining with character.
I've spoken with your brother quite recently, and you'll be aware of all those biographical accounts of you and him at home arguing. I asked him, I said, what on earth were you arguing about to such an extent that you eventually had to have a treaty hung up on the wall to stop you arguing? He couldn't remember what you argued about. Do you remember what you argued about?
Not really, but it wasn't about politics. It was more about my feeling that until his arrival, I had things more or less arranged as I wanted them, namely the whole attention of my mother, the possibility of marrying her, the possibility of elbowing her husband out of the picture one way or another, and, you know, supreme power, at least in the microcosm. And this plan had not taken into account the arrival of a sibling.
No, he said...
Who was born slightly too near. I mean, I used not to be terribly interested in this new work on birth order and sibling rivalry and so forth, but I think there must be something in it. I think it's probably unfortunate for both Peter and for me that he was born at a time when he was too near me to be a baby brother, needing protection or inspiring that kind of feeling, but near enough to be a rival, and smart and tough.
He said that the idea was almost that arriving from the hospital, the notion was that perhaps he'd be sent back to the hospital the next day as well. And I put it to him, I apologized when I did. I said, look, it's very vulgar Freudian of me, but you were both competing for your mother's love. And he said, he waved that away, but you confirmed that.
You're quite wrong to wave a thing like that away. It's not waveable away. I'm sure I can remember telling him he was adopted. For example, with a reasonable chance that he might believe it.
What a terrible thing.
Yeah. Well, no, when it's a matter of survival, I'm not to be trusted. I mean, I'm fairly ruthless.
Because speaking to him, there was very little about his mother. But in your book, I think it would be fair to say that she is the only woman in the book who is presented as a whole human being. Other
Yes.
women in your life are skipped over.
Yeah, well, I feel that anyone who's going to do a memoir probably has to give an account of both parents, because it may tell more about you than you intend to, but you've got to do your best to show roughly what your provenance is in that way. And then perhaps you're right in saying there should be at least one fully rounded profile of a female, because I'm not going to try and do all the others in that. I don't make it sound as if it's too much of an embarrass de richesse, but you can't do it every time. And if you can't do it fairly, then you better not do it at all. So that's why I begin the book by saying, on this, you'll have to ask them or someone else. The book isn't about that. If you can't do it properly and try and be fair to all sides, you better just make a self-denying ordinance, which I do.
But with male friends...
I didn't mention my children either. That was partly, I think, whether they asked me not to or not, I could feel that they'd just as soon be left out.
But male friends...
Male friends is absolutely different.
Why is it different?
Especially when you're trying to test the proposition, which I do in my chapter on Martin Amis. Is it possible to have a heterosexual relationship with a man? And my answer is, not in so many words, but the answer is, well, pretty nearly, yeah. It was as near as I could come. And so I was very stirred when I saw him being interviewed not very long ago, this year, since the book came out anyway, by Charlie Rose on PBS, and asked about me and our long attachment. And he said, well, what, now when he looked back on it, it struck him as being an unconsummated gay marriage. Now, if you have any idea of Martin's contribution to the world of the heterosexual and relative abstinence, shall we say, from the world of the gay, I mean, that's as nice a compliment as one's likely to get from a chap with whom one hasn't actually got physical. So I think that's worth relating.
But I don't...
Whereas if I tell some story about it didn't really work out with Juliet or so forth, I really would feel I was wasting my time and other people's and possibly hers. And then someone who wasn't Juliet would call up and say, so, you had room for her, but not for me. And I could see all this coming, so I just said, I'm not doing it. The book's already nearly half as much again in length as the publishers asked for. And I haven't yet finished the stuff about Chile, Poland, Cuba, and Kashmir.
But a woman who read it...
Look, the book is about the struggle of ideas as refracted through some, but not all, personal relationships. But it's about the struggle for clarity in the ideological world.